Exercise early before you eat anything. Put off that first meal until noon. Don't eat after 5. Cardio is king. If you've had a loop track of body and exercise rules playing in your head for decades, please allow us an enormous record scratch through the whole thing, because it feels like everything we know about women's health is changing quickly. Dr. Stacey Sims is an exercise physiologist and nutrition scientist from Stanford University in the States. And she has been doing the rounds of some podcasts lately, blowing people's minds with her insights into why it is that if you and a man in your life, and there'll be a lot of listeners who recognize this situation, if you and a man in your life embark on some kind of health and fitness challenge at the same time, on like day 5, he's boasting about all his results and you're still slogging away waiting for something to change on about day 20. Dr. Sims knows why this is, and she went on Mel Robbins of, yes, Let Them Fame's podcast last week and spelled out some new rules. Here's Mel's first question about what's different between men and women's workouts.
What's the most common mistake that women make by following male-centric fitness advice?
Women's bodies don't respond well to fasted training.
What's fasted training? I don't even know what the heck this is. Like, what was fasted training?
Fasted training means you're not having any food before you go do exercise. It comes really to the brain, right? So when we start looking just at first thing you get up, and our responses are different, where women's brains will start going, okay, where's the food to come in to help bring my stress hormones down and get me started for the day?
Okay.
And men, by the nature of being XY, their brain's like, okay, I'm going to supply some amino acids and some blood sugar and let's get on with the day. Then we'll find some food. But women's brain, specifically what we call the hypothalamus, that is really sensitive to blood sugar and food coming in. So if you get up and you start your exercise without any food, the hypothalamus is like, wait a second. This is a stress to the body that I need to really try to figure out. But if I don't have food to counter the fuel that the muscles are needing from a contraction, I need to find a way to supply that fuel. And one of the first things that starts to get broken down is your muscle mass.
So what Dr. Sims says is women should get up early if they're going to exercise. And lots of women exercise first thing in the morning because stealing the time from sleep is the only time available to them. And eat something, anything, something small and protein rich. She actually, on that, she talks about making this little like coffee chia pudding that she puts in the fridge overnight. But she likes coffee, which is a good thing.
Bit of Aussie beef.
Yeah, a bit of Aussie beef would be great, especially if it was tartare. But a few spoonfuls of yogurt, half a banana, whatever. She says, do that. She also reaffirmed what women everywhere are being told over and over, which is it's not about cardio, friends, it's about weights. She says do heavy ones in short reps. Then she also said that the fitness bro favorite of ice baths are also not ideal for women, that we don't cope with that level of cold so well, but we love heat, so saunas are great. And then, in excellent news for lazy girls, she says we're probably exercising too much. 10 minutes hard out in the morning is probably plenty as long as it involves lifting heavy weights, says Sims. Okay, Jessie and Amelia, are you excited or confused about the fact that everything we've been told about exercise is probably wrong?
I find this really exciting, and it made me realise listening to conversations like this are almost a bit discombobulating, because it feels like for the first time we're talking about women's exercise outside the framework of weight loss, like as something to do with our bodies and functionality, which is not what was happening ever in the history of ever. And so I'm finding the research field fascinating, because we're hearing tidbits, like even I remember hearing, obviously with the rise of the Matildas and the really exciting popularity of female sport, that things like ACL injuries for women are way higher than men, and they think that could be to do with a myriad of factors, but one of them is hormonal fluctuations, which means that you could tailor training so that you go, all right, we don't do this particular thing during this particular moment, whatever it is, so that women don't get as injured. And while that is all really exciting, I guess my only thing when I go really deep on this is that it's worth us remembering that Dr. Sims is an expert who has, for most of her career, worked with elite athletes. Mm-hmm. And if we find this alienating or overwhelming, that's okay, because we're not elite athletes. My concern with exercise is always that we might throw too much information at women, and then overwhelm them. And my reaction to overwhelm is to do nothing. So if I'm in a routine and then I get told you're doing it wrong, then I'm kind of like, well, screw it. I don't want to walk into a gym and be confused about what to do. I mean, the headline is movement is great. And I think that our bodies almost instinctively know, like it does feel good to be able to lift things.
I think it's also who she's talking to is actually, apart from elite athletes, a specific kind of woman who is already exercising a lot, right? So she's talking to the people who do think that doing heavy cardio all the time has always been the way to get the ideal, in inverted commas, female body. And what she's saying, and lots of other experts are saying, is that actually that's bad for our bodies in terms of it's going to make our bones more brittle and all of those things, and that strength is key. But Amelia, sometimes I feel like Jessie with the overwhelm, like even the thing as simple as eat something first thing in the morning, that's not how my morning world works. No. So now I'm like, oh God, how do I fit in having a breakfast ready at 6:30 in the morning when I'm going out to do my exercise? What do you think? Is it overwhelming or is it helpful? And also, how do I do that? Any tips?
I am someone who gets very hangry very easily. I have, you know how some people say, oh, I forgot to eat lunch today? Yeah. Never happened.
Never happened.
Never. So I always need to eat a hot cross bun when I get up. If you haven't noticed, that's a bit of a theme here.
It sounds like you're just very in touch with your body.
And I love carbs. But I think that this emphasis on saunas and heat is really interesting. I lived in Japan for a few years and I learned there about the joys of the onsen, which is communal bathing. And then I realized that basically every single culture around the world, except for Anglo cultures, emphasize the importance of communal bathing and the importance of heat specifically in that communal bathing experience. So in Japan, obviously, it's a big thing. In Korea, it's a big thing. Turkey.
Yeah, Northern Europe.
Yeah, basically literally everywhere except for in Anglo cultures. And so I do have a friend who we used to get together for Negronis, and now we get together for a spot of sauna instead, and then we get a Negroni afterwards because we're human. But I think it's a really great way to socialize as well with other women is to go to a sauna or to have that kind of experience. And I've noticed that those more casual, more financially accessible saunas are popping up all over the place, and I think it's for that reason. I did try cold plunge once. Have you ever tried a cold plunge?
I never have, except, just by accident when the hot water runs out.
We've talked on this show about the Wim Hof method, and obviously Wim Hof himself is a controversial figure, but I did try the cold plunge and it actually led to the best sleep I've ever had in my life. But then I subsequently heard, and then this was borne out in this podcast interview, that for women in particular, you don't need to get into freezing cold water to get the health benefits. You can actually get into water that's around 15 degrees Celsius, which is actually pretty doable just in the morning when you get in the shower to have a bit of a cold shot in the shower. So I think thinking about being healthy is not just exercise, but also these other ways you can integrate health into your life is a good thing.
I think you're right, Jessie, too, about that, not getting too hung up about the rules. Because one of the things, we all love rules, right? Because it makes things simpler. But I know loads of women, and I at times in my life have loved, when I used to do boot camp, let's be clear about how many years ago this was, quite a few. But remember when I went through that phase of doing 6 a.m. boot camp at the beach in Sydney? And that was a co-ed situation. And I loved that. Like, I loved doing all the ropes and all those things with the guys. And I know I've got lots of female friends who love doing hard cardio in mixed environments. I don't think we have to be so literal about this kind of advice that we go, well, it's great that we're learning more about women's bodies. Now we have to exercise completely separately in a completely different way and doing everything entirely differently. I think it's more about taking the bits that work for you, right?
Yeah, because even I've seen it become more and more specialised. And again, Dr. Sims literally has a degree in this, but it gets more and more specialised, and then it gets into the cycle. And I've seen a lot of these like cycle syncing workouts where people talk about what you do on day 1 and day 2. To me, and if that works for you, absolutely. To me, way too complicated. I'm not even in touch with if I have my period right now, let alone what day I am and whether I should lift a weight.
And also, you don't need more excuses for not getting out there.
Exactly. I don't feel like I need that. And I've seen it co-opted by people who don't have access to the science and then provide these workout routines that it basically makes women feel like you need a degree in order to show up to the gym. And I don't think that's the best thing. I did find I listened to the Quickie this morning where they were talking about some of these findings, and the stuff about how during puberty a woman's centre of gravity changes was fascinating, because we know that women's or girls rather, their involvement in sport drops off, which is due to a lot of reasons. But centre of gravity, this thing about you might actually feel less balanced, or if you're playing netball every week, then you kind of don't feel like yourself. That kind of research feels fundamental and really important. And I thought this during pregnancy, because people say, you know, I said to my obstetrician, can I keep exercising? And in fact, the advice he gave me was make sure you eat before. That's really important during pregnancy. And they say to do what you've always done, not do anything too differently. But with pregnant bodies, they're even less studied. It's like women's bodies not touched, pregnant bodies, everything from medication to and what it results in, which is a good thing, is complete risk aversion, but also us not knowing if that antidepressant or that blah impacts the body, because how do you study it?
There are good reasons for this, right? Like
good
apart
reasons,
from patriarchy and sexism, which is obviously part of it, but also I've heard plenty of experts say it's hard to get control groups of pregnant women for very obvious reasons. But these seem like problems that should be able to be solved in this day and age.
There's also the age issue. I mean, I feel like the way I exercised in my 20s, I went through a brief orthorexic period of running 7 miles a day and not eating anything until lunchtime. I couldn't even do that now if I wanted to. And so I think that notion of being gentle on yourself from what you could do earlier in your life versus what you can do now is really important as well.
That it changes throughout a lifetime. She is also one of the women who's working on this menstrual blood test stuff. Did we talk about this on the show?
Yeah.
Where it's, so she's working on, for example, if you don't live anywhere near a doctor, she wants us to be able to test our menstrual blood and see what we can find out about our health. She's a very impressive figure.